Today I'd like to talk about healing the wounds of war. Um, One of the things that I've observed after the experience in America of the Vietnam War was that in many ways there was no healing after that war because of the division in the country. There were those who were firmly opposed to the war, and that became a gradual awareness on the part of people. I think initially people felt we're stopping communism. That's a good thing. We have an alliance with South Vietnam. We said we would help them. It was a good thing to go and help them. But then as the war dragged on, and there seemed to be very little progress being made, and the reality was that it would have taken a very long-term commitment of American troops to be there to support the South Vietnamese. And the fact that it was a guerrilla warfare and it was hard to tell who was the enemy and who was not, it led to a lot of division because people said, well, let's stop this war, let's get out of it. And there were others who felt very differently, who felt, yes, we want to end it, but we want to end it honorably, and we want to have a victory. America is used to victories in war. We had a big victory, of course, in the First World War, the Second World War, Korea, not so much. It was kind of a stalemate. But then with Vietnam, the prospect of a real defeat for America was in the offing, and people were like, this is terrible, maybe we should stay. And so it created a lot of division. There were people that were opposed to it that were really firmly opposed to it. And there were those, of course, who served in the war, who gave their time and a very valuable commitment to their country and thought that they were doing something good for the country. And they came back and they were not honored, they were not respected. And of course, when you're fighting in the war, you're not the one who's responsible for declaring the war or engaging in the war. You're just trying to do what you've been trained to do to keep the peace and what your commanders are telling you to do. So it was a very difficult situation for those who were serving even, because they came back to very little appreciation and sometimes to a lot of disrespect. That people said, well, you're over there, you shouldn't be, you're killing people and doing bad stuff. And so it was a difficult situation. And I was reading an article recently, and I thought it presented a way forward for us in terms of healing the wounds of the Vietnam War. And it takes us back, the article, to 1960, about 3 young men who graduated from Fordham Prep in the Bronx, which is a wonderful high school associated with Fordham University. It's on the Rose Hill campus. And it was the time of the Vietnam War, of course, in the 60s. Jack Garrity graduated in 60. He went to the U.S. Naval Academy. Jack Bergen graduated. He went to the U.S. Military Academy. And Brendan Walsh. Brendan went to Lemoyne College. And at Lemoyne, he studied under a Jesuit priest, Father Daniel Berrigan, who was against the war. Basically a pacifist priest against all war, particularly in the nuclear age. So Brendan was very much influenced by his teacher. He went into the seminary, but then left the seminary in 1967, and he relocated to Baltimore. When he was there in Baltimore, he worked with the brother of his former teacher, that is Philip Berrigan, who was at that point a Josephite priest. And so Brendan became active in the anti-war movement under the influence of the Berrigan brothers. So you have these 3 who graduated, same school, same time, 2 going into military service, the other in the opposite direction, really, more of a pacifist and against war. So Brendan marries Willa Bickham, who was a former nun. She was a registered nurse. But she also very much felt the same way that Brendan felt about war and about the Vietnam situation. So they formed a partnership together. Mr. Walsh drove the Catonsville 9 to the Selective Service Office on May 17, 1968, as one of their actions against the war. And those who were involved in that action stole draft files, poured blood on them, burned them in the parking lot. And their point in doing that was to say that this war at this point is immoral. And many Catholic theologians at that point were questioning the war and saying, well, the problem is if you take the just war theory, that you are certainly allowed to fight back when you are attacked. One of the key principles of that just war theory is the concept of proportionality, that you should not engage in a conflict where you're using means that are really out of whack with the aims that you're trying to accomplish. And with all the napalming and the bombing that was going on of cities and innocent civilians, the thought was, well, this war is not really a proportional war. It's really an out-of-control war. It's an immoral war, and therefore we should not be part of it. And so they felt justified in doing some actions to resist the war machine in the country at that time. All of these people who were involved in this action in Catonsville, they were arrested and they were tried. And in that same year, Mr. Walsh was not arrested because he just drove them there. He wasn't involved in the action. In 1968, Mr. Walsh and Miss Bickham turned their house into a Catholic worker house of hospitality. It was called Viva House. So the Catholic worker movement, which is a Catholic pacifist movement, anti-war movement, founded by Peter Bourne and Dorothy Day, their concept really is to create these houses of hospitality, to have dialogue with people, and to change people's attitudes towards war, towards racism, and very much to bring the social justice teachings of the Catholic Church to the fore for our Catholic people and for all people of goodwill. Their first visitor reportedly to that house was Dorothy Day, who was the foundress of the Catholic worker movement. At that time, Mr. Garrity had become captain of a swift boat in the Mekong Delta. So a very dangerous situation for him on the Delta. And Mr. Bergen had joined the South Vietnamese battalion in the hills north of Da Nang as an Army Ranger. So he's working with the South Vietnamese, trying to eradicate the North Vietnamese, the Viet Cong, from that area. So both of them were involved in very difficult, very dangerous situations, life-threatening situations. Both returned from the war with Bronze Stars, so they were recognized for their heroism. Mr. Garrity became a successful Wall Street executive after he left the Navy, and Mr. Bergen continued his Army career that ended in the Pentagon. And he was a speechwriter for Caspar Weinberger, who was the Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration. When he finished his service at the Pentagon and retired, he became an executive at CBS and also at Alcoa. So both men very successful in their military careers, in their service to their country, and very successful in the business world as well. Mr. Walsh and Miss Bickham are still working and living in Viva House. So they went through that war experience. War is over. They continued serving the poor with meals, with housing, helping them. They have served literally millions of meals, provided temporary emergency shelter to countless individuals and families who are displaced by tragedy and violence. Sometimes they're burned out of their homes, sometimes there's robberies, sometimes there's very difficult situations. loss of job, and people need homes. And so they offer their home on a temporary basis. They've also distributed tons of groceries to local residents through their food pantry. So their concept is, yes, service to the country, but service to those who are most in need, the poor. Let us help them. Let us build them up. People meet there at Viva House and have these discussions, these roundtable discussions. Peter Bowen referred to it as the agronomic universities, the idea of studying the issues of the day, studying also about farming, and creating these centers of farming, creating small businesses to help people. That was Peter's concept as a way to engage people and a way to end poverty. So people meet there to discuss these problems of poverty and also problems of violence in our society and how we can become less violent and more understanding and create more community. They've written a book which is called The Long Loneliness in Baltimore, Stories Along the Way, in 2017. The Long Loneliness was the famous book by Dorothy Day, so they kind of took part of that title and applied it to their work in Baltimore. Interestingly, they used to serve older men who had drinking and drug problems initially. Now they're serving more families with children. And they say it has become more challenging for them. It's very difficult. The healing took place in 2021 when Mr. Bergen and Mr. Garrity nominated Mr. Walsh for a coveted award from Fordham Prep. And they nominated him to be part of the Hall of Honor in Fordham Prep. So differences. Bergen and Garrity served their country in the military. Mr. Walsh served in a different capacity, serving the poor, was against the war, was more of a pacifist. And Mr. Bergen, when Mr. Walsh was inducted into the Hall of Honor, said despite Brendan showing a dedication, persistence, and courage that exceeds anything I can claim in my own life, I'll bet he got far less encouragement and recognition. Mr. Bergen realized that this was a difficult path that Brendan had taken, a path that would not be recognized in the society as a significant accomplishment. But in terms of social justice, in terms of helping the poor, it was recognized by Mr. Bergen. Mr. Bergen and Mr. Garrity started an endowment in Mr. Walsh's name to support the numerous service activities in Fordham Prep. And even students from Fordham Prep came to Viva House, collected food, brought the food, and the graduating class donated their class gift to the Brendan Walsh Service Endowment. So the healing that has taken place is amazing. We honor the service, certainly, of those who went into the military. But those who went into the military are also now honoring the service of people who took a different path. And I think that brings us together as a country more. We realize that there are many ways to help and support the community. And we recognize the dignity and worth of each person. And we don't cast aspersions on anyone. But we work together to make our world a better place and to resolve some of those problems of poverty and of violence. The healing has begun. And I think the healing of those wounds from war are extremely important going forward.